Your daily fix of women's mixed martial arts from the UFC, Invicta FC, Bellator, and one championship. Be in the loop, cause Golden State Media Concepts got you covered. Get your fix of women's MMA with Got You Covered on Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast.
Thank you for tuning to the GSMC Women's MMA Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Arnel De Leon, and hopefully you are doing well for yourself. You, your friends, your family, whether you live in the States or internationally, I hope you are doing fine for yourself. Stay healthy, stay safe, wash your hands, and hopefully we can all cross our fingers here and hope that the year of 2020 will continually become better. Because there's no way it can get any worse, to be honest with you. So, Fight Island has just ended, which is kind of a sad thing, but also a weird experience to go through as a fight fan. Fight Island has ended. Now we have another event coming up this upcoming Saturday, to which you have Joanne Calderwood against Jennifer Maia. That's going to be a real fun fight. But let's stick with the very last women's fight coming from Fight Island. That is Carla Esparza versus Marina Rodriguez. So, coming to this fight, I predicted Marina Rodriguez winning this fight. And the reason I believe so was because at this point at Carla Esparza's career, she has never really been known as a person who stops fights or dominates her opponents. And she's kind of caught in a wall here where the only way she can go and get into the top 5, into the rankings, was through dominating her opponents and through stopping people. And Carla Esparza said herself in the post-fight interview in that her main goal for this fight against Marina Rodriguez was to go for the stoppage. Go for a stoppage, dominate her opponent. It was more so trying to win with style than it was winning the fights. Because Carla Esparza, she's been pretty much stuck in this weird gatekeeper territory, just being outside the top 5, being outside the top 6, competing in the women's strawweight division, and she's competing against people who are outside the rankings, or she never fights anybody ahead of her in the rankings. She's always fighting young prospects, or fighting against women who are trying to use her as a pedestal to climb up into the strawweight rankings here. And when she fought against Michelle Waterson, I thought to myself, wow, congratulations, you won the fight. But it wasn't impressive enough as a performance for me to go say, okay, you definitely belong in the top 5. I definitely see Carla Esparza fighting Rose Namajunas, Jessica Andrade, Joanna Jędrzejczyk, Weili Zhang, even like Nina Ansaroff and Tatiana Suarez. I don't see Carla Esparza competing at that high enough level. That's why it was very important for Esparza to go defeat Marina Rodriguez in a very compelling, very dominating, in a very absolute fashion, as for you to know that Carla Esparza is really, really good. And I thought that level of desperation for Carla Esparza would be her end here. Because Marina Rodriguez, she came to this fight as an undefeated fighter. Marina Rodriguez, in terms of physicals, had a lot of similar qualities to that of Michelle Waterson, and that actually she had a lot more. Her physicals are more impressive than Waterson, and for a lot of fighters who end up stopping Carla Esparza, she's the much more bigger fighter, she's a lot more taller, she's very lengthy, and she's a good kickboxer. And when you look at, and I say right now, Marina Rodriguez, her striking game is superior than Michelle Waterson, but she doesn't have the experience that Waterson has in this fight. So I thought Carla Esparza, the desperate former champion, Marina Rodriguez, the hungry prospect, who's got the length, who's got the reach advantage, and who wants to go and impress Dana White so she can go climb her way into the top 10 rankings. Because if Marina Rodriguez were to defeat Carla Esparza, Marina Rodriguez could have possibly be in the top 8 of the women's strawweight rankings. She really could have, and that could have made Marina Rodriguez go fight against somebody like Claudia Cadella, or Nina Ansaroff, or Tatiana Suarez. So Marina Rodriguez is about 2 more fights away from potentially getting a title fight if she defeats Carla Esparza. Compared to Carla Esparza, who has to go, finish her opponents, and Esparza isn't really known for finishing her opponents. And then by the end of this fight, Carla Esparza did not finish her opponent. She didn't. She won the fight by decision after 3 rounds of action. And I'll say this right, Carla Esparza, she had a really strong performance. Absolutely really strong performance here. Let me go what happened in the per round basis here. Actually, first I'll talk about the overall fight stats. So Carla Esparza, she landed 77% of her shots. 118 out of 152. she landed 33 out of 60 significant strikes, 55%. And Carla Esparza landed 5 out of 9 takedown attempts. 5 out of 9. One submission attempt, really didn't do much, honestly. Marina Rodriguez, she landed 70% of her shots. She landed 91 out of 129. She landed 40 out of 76 significant strikes, 52%. If you look at the fight stats here, overall, Carla Esparza overall just did much more better here. But let's focus on the per round basis here. Now that you know that Esparza accumulated more strikes than Marina Rodriguez in this fight, you're thinking, okay then, that means Carla Esparza throughout all 3 rounds then was consistently beating her. No, that's not the case. Let's look at each round here. Marina Rodriguez, first round, she landed 20 of 33 significant strikes. 20 of 33. Compare that to Carla Esparza's 8 of 12. Good striking accuracy there by Esparza, but Marina Rodriguez nearly landed 3 times as many significant strikes in the first round than Esparza did. Not only that, Marina Rodriguez was doing an awesome job in the first round. One could have argued that Marina Rodriguez, if that fight were to continue on for another minute and a half, Marina Rodriguez could defeat Carla Esparza. And it's because there was a moment in this fight, this also could have been in the second round here, no, through all 3 rounds here, but there was one singular moment in the fight where Esparza went for a double leg takedown, her opponent's onto the cage. Now regularly, when a wrestler takes down their opponent and their opponent's pressed up onto the cage, what they do is that they go press up all their weights, all their shoulder, all their chest onto their opponents, and they're suffocating their opponent essentially. They're applying a whole lot of pressure, making their opponent as uncomfortable as possible. So in order to go fatigue them. Carla Esparza, double leg takedown, she did a thing where she pressed up herself onto her opponent, but then she attempted a submission. She went in for a leg key lock. Didn't turn out well for her. Marina Rodriguez reverses the leg key lock, goes on top of Esparza and starts raining bombs, throwing in elbows. Marina Rodriguez was throwing out elbows, a vicious strike from the bottom position. I would say Marina Rodriguez dished out more damage than Carla Esparza in the first and second round of the fight, even though she was in the bottom position. Esparza won via split decision. We know why. Now we go to the second round here. Pretty much the same here. Pretty much. So Carla Esparza, she landed 7 of 19 compared to Marina Rodriguez, who was 14 of 29. She landed twice as many shots and also attempted 10 more shots than Esparza. So statistically, you would say, oh, Marina Rodriguez, she won the second round. But not really. That was a close one. I say Marina won the first round. Second round, though, Esparza had majority ground control here, and it wasn't as bad as first round, because in the first round, Esparza takes down Marina. Marina laying in some really good shots from the bottom. It reminded me a lot of Michael Bisping versus GSP. And that GSP took down Michael Bisping, but Michael Bisping was doing such an amazing job from the bottom position that in that scenario, Bisping was winning the fight. And that's how it was with Marina and Carla. Marina was in the bottom. She was in the ground. And although Carla Esparza had ground control on Marina, Marina was obviously the one who was winning the fight from the ground position. She was. And the same thing was kind of being said in the second round here, but not to the extent as it was in the first round. Not too much. So now it all depends on perspective now, because those first 2 rounds, the second round, it all depends on perspective on the second round. Because second round kind of is similar to the first round, except Carla did slightly much more better here. She did a little bit more better in terms of controlling her opponents. Marina Rodriguez didn't do as much from the bottom position compared to the first round. And then went to the third round. Third round, obviously Carla Esparza won that fight. Carla Esparza won the third round, unanimous, ground control on Marina. Marina barely didn't do anything. She was pretty much gassed out by the third round. Esparza landed 18 of 29 significant strikes, compared to Marina Rodriguez, 6 of 14. So without a doubt, Carla Esparza won the third round. Without a doubt, Marina Rodriguez won the first round. Now the second round. Who do you judge to win that fight? Do you judge Carla Esparza winning that fight because she grappled and she controlled her opponent more on the ground? Are you rewarding Carla Esparza for takedowns? Are you rewarding Carla Esparza because she pretty much was in control of the fight from the top position the majority of the time? Do you reward that? Or do you award Marina Rodriguez for being able to defend herself and being able to dish out a lot of really good shots from the bottom? And when they're on stand-up, Marina Rodriguez was obviously winning the striking exchange also. Who do you award in that fight? It was an incredibly close fight. I say Carla Esparza wins the fight by mere inches. By mere inches. If Marina was a little bit more active in the second round, just pulled out maybe 3 to 6 more significant strikes off that second round from the bottom position, Marina would have won. Marina would have won if she just did a little bit more in the second round. But Carla Esparza, she barely scratched away in this fight. She barely defeated Marina Rodriguez in this bout here, and it was a close fight. I say it was the best fight of the night. In my opinion, it was a better fight than Darren Till versus Robert Whittaker. I gave it 2 thumbs up, a really fun fight to watch, and I recommend, this might be probably one of Carla Esparza's best performances, to be honest with you. It's because Carla Esparza, she is known by many to be kind of a boring fighter, to be honest with you. She really is. Like, she comes in, goes for a double leg takedown, and then from that moment on, it's just her controlling her opponents. Carla Esparza was desperate. Carla Esparza fought the exact opposite way she would be fighting. She normally is used to fighting, in that she fights very methodically, very slow, grind out game. Here instead, it's Carla Esparza running straight forward, putting herself in really bad position here. She endured a lot of damage in this fight that she could have avoided. If Carla Esparza did not know she had to go really stop or really showcase how good she is in this fight, I'm pretty sure we've seen a very traditional Carla Esparza fight, where she's fighting very slow, very methodical, goes for a takedown, and fights patiently, and isn't going for these overwhelming strikes immediately. Carla Esparza fought really reckless in this fight, but she needed to do that in order to stake her claim into going up in the rankings. Interestingly enough, though, I'm looking at the rankings right now. Carla Esparza, number 8. Both Claudia Cadella and Carla Esparza have been going through the issue of fighting prospects who are trying to get into the rankings, and they themselves have been stuck around the 7 through 9 range all time. So Claudia Cadella, just like Carla Esparza, is going to be fighting another prospect in Yan Xinan. So Yan Xinan, she defeated Carolina Kowalewicz, Angela Hill, and she's ranked number 9 right now. She's right now ranked number 9 in the women's strawweight division here. What's probably going to happen? I can see Claudia. No, I know. This is a really tough fight. It really is for Claudia, because Claudia gave really a pretty tough performance against Angela Hill. I thought Angela Hill would have won that fight, and Yan is a much more better striker than Angela, and Claudia will probably go through this fight as a striker versus striker match here, even though she's got a really good ground game. So Yan versus Claudia, he's gonna win this fight. It's a complete toss-up. I predicted Marina Rodriguez defeating Carla Esparza. I was wrong in that prediction. Marina had a really strong performance there. But I think Yan is a slightly better striker than Marina. I think her striking game is good enough to go overwhelm Claudia. I also think that Yan is strong enough as a grappler to go stop Claudia Cadella. That's if she goes for the grappling. But I also feel like, just like Carla Esparza, Claudia Cadella is going to go to this fight kind of desperate. Where she'd be like, okay, I want to go into the top 5 of the rankings. I have to finish my opponent. And Claudia Cadella is more likely to get into the top 5 of the women's strawweight rankings if she knocks her opponent out, as opposed to Claudia Cadella striking with Yan in whatever performance, and that gives her the unanimous decision victory. Because Claudia and Carla Esparza, they're very smart, but at this point right now, they have to fight recklessly. They have to put themselves in bad position in order to impress the bosses up at the UFC execs, the bookers, to go say, hey, I deserve a title fight here. Whoever wins this fight is going to go fight against Carla Esparza. And also, one fight that I'm very excited for in the strawweight rankings will be Michelle Waterson versus Angela Hill. Those fighters are also very desperate into trying to make their case and prove themselves. And look at this also. We also have, coming up in just 1 month from now, we have Alexa Grasso versus Ji-Yeon Kim. Those two fighters that are in desperate need of also right now, the women's strawweight rankings right now is comprised of fighters who are desperately trying to do what they can to go defeat their opponent as dominating fashion as they possibly can try to have such a really good performance, they can go and be ranked high, even more high in the rankings here. A lot of fighters here are bouncing back from losses or bouncing back from wins to which they're expected to win, or bouncing back from unimpressive victories or performances. There's a lot happening in the women's strawweight rankings in the next month that right now it really is unpredictable and it's very fun. So you're listening to the GSMC Women's MMA Podcast. Coming back right after the short break here. See you soon.
Check out the show that's built on the MMA. From the UFC to extreme cage fighting, they got the fights covered. Check out the GSMC MMA podcast. Get the latest news on past or upcoming fights. Join us as we talk to and about some of the biggest names in the MMA, past, present, and future. When it's the fight game, there's just one show to check out. GSMCpodcast.com/MMA-podcast. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info. Are you looking for the very best NFL and college football podcast? Then check out the GSMC Football Podcast. Get the latest football news both on and off the field. From the NFL Draft to trades to the rumor mill to the NFL Combines. They got you covered. That's GSMCpodcast.com/football-podcast. Get updates on college rivalries, game day insights, and much, much more. It's football talk the way you want it. This show eats, sleeps, and breathes football. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
And we are back. So coming up this Saturday is a women's fight bout between number one contender Joanne Calderwood against Jennifer Maia. Those two are fighting at it because Jennifer Maia's opponent is unavailable due to COVID-19. And also Joanne Calderwood, she has to make some money. She has to make some money somehow. Considering the fact that Valentina Shevchenko, the person who she's supposed to fight, that fight has been rebooked. Calderwood versus Valentina has been rebooked twice. And it's been cancelled yet again. So right now, Joanne Calderwood is like, okay, I gotta make money somehow, alright? I can't keep waiting for Valentina. I'm gonna fight against Jennifer Maia with just less than a week's notice. Insane. Absolute insanity there. But that's coming up in the fight division. I just recently talked about Carlos Esparza against Marina Rodriguez. We got two fighters trying to climb up their way into the strawweight rankings. But what's going up on the very top? At the very top, we have Jessica Andrade, who recently lost to Rose Namajunas. We have Weili Zhang, who's unavailable. We don't know what her timestamp is on when she's going to come back. So at the top, we got the challenger, Rose Namajunas, coming back after a huge bounce-back victory, the comeback story of Rose. Rose, she's going to fight against the fighter, the champion, that she herself was afraid to fight in the first place. A champion that she chose not to fight her. She was given the opportunity by Dana White, and was like, hey, Rose, you're gonna fight against the number one fighter in the women's strawweight division, one of the best fighters in the entire world, Weili Zhang. And Rose said no. And then it became a fight of the year candidate with Weili Zhang against Weili Zhang. But now, Rose Namajunas, in a recent interview she had at ESPN MMA with Ariel Helwani, she seems very confident. She's very confident. She has a lot of energy, even though her face looks battered from that war she had against Jessica Andrade. She feels really good about herself. She's a lot more better now, I think, psychologically than she was like a year ago. Really. And this coming in from also BloodyElbow.com that Namajunas expects a beautiful display of martial arts versus Zhang. She's a master. I'm a master. That's the headline. After UFC 51 victory, thug Rose Namajunas is already looking forward to a fight against Weili Zhang. So former UFC strawweight champion Rose Namajunas got the job done on Saturday night at UFC 51 against Jessica Andrade. Facial bruises aside, Thug Rose got even with a split decision victory with a $50,000 win bonus for Fight of the Night. Okay, gonna put this out there. Former champion, you should get a little bit more than that. Especially for Fight of the Night. I always thought submission of the night and knockout of the night should get $50,000. and then performance of the night should get 75, then fight of the night bonus should give you double pay. That's how I always perceived it, really. If you have the best fight of the night, you should get double pay. Performance of the night bonuses and knockout of the night or submission of the nights, there should be a little bit under. But that's what Rose Namajunas got. Getting to assess her performance a few days later, Namajunas spoke with Ariel Helwani on ESPN. She goes on to say, I loved it. Yeah, I loved it even more considering the improvement Andrade made. She said, this is a transcript coming from MMAJunkie.com. I was happy with the level that I was prepared for. Going to the third, I knew she was going to come out a little desperate, anticipating that I was like, oh, she's going to hit me really sharp here. Obviously, I got caught, but overall, I was just so proud of myself. The victory over Andrade moved Namajunas to the number 1 spot at 150-pound rankings, right below champion Weili Zhang. A title fight is the next logical step, with Rose already welcomed. Ever since I saw her fight with Tecia Torres, I've been scouting her out a little bit, and Namajunas said, I just think it's going to be a beautiful display of martial arts. She's a master, I'm a master, it's going to be really cool. I'll love to fight her, she's awesome, she's really technical because she's really strong also. Just overall a master. That's something that really interests me a lot. This will be... I'm going to say this right now. I believe it's going to be a better fight than the Weili Zhang and Joanna Jędrzejczyk fights. I believe so. This is another fight of the year contender here. Now we don't know if this fight's going to happen this year. We don't know that because COVID is a huge issue right now. International flights are weird. Second wave might be coming. We got basketball coming back though this upcoming Saturday. International sports are coming back. Strangely enough though, I live in the California area, and it felt like everything was doing a soft reopen. Like restaurants were softly reopening up. Even like library stores were reopening up. Gyms were reopening up. And then, this past week, everything's like reclosing again. Like restaurants are reclosing. Gyms are reclosing. But if you go outside, there's a lot of people still driving and still walking around, walking their dog, hanging out in the park. I saw the other day, like, there was a scrimmage game happening, like a 3v3 park game happening. So right now, I'm confused. I don't know what to expect from the situation. I recently attended a party with that had like 7 to 11 people. So yeah, like 7 to 11 of my close friends being there. And I don't know what to expect. I don't know. This past 4th of July, I know, like, why am I talking on 4th of July at this, like, time? But, this past 4th of July, there was a whole large crowd of people. It's never happened before in my neighborhood. And that we had an entire row of people in the California area just throwing up fireworks up there. You literally couldn't drive, you couldn't look in any direction without fireworks coming up or you seeing fireworks. It's that insane. So right now, I have no clue what's going on with the social distancing. I don't get what's going on with international flights. I don't get what's going on right now with, like, sporting is weird. Sporting is still really weird right now. So far, Florida is the only thing that's going up right now as it pertains to, pushing forward in, like, sporting events, basketball, UFC, pro wrestling. But, if something really bad happens in the bubble coming up this Saturday, oh man, it's gonna be really bad. It's gonna be really, really bad right now. Because it was reported, I know this isn't about mixed martial arts here, but this extends to mixed martial arts. There's a player named Lou Williams, and all these NBA players were given restrictions in that they just can't leave a certain spot or a certain area. Like, it's pretty much documented, where that these players have to order food, but they have to order food within a list, or they have to go and ask their agent or their manager or ask whoever is actually like the commissioner or who's setting up the basketball event here. Like, they're gonna bring them food and they have no clue what the food is. And it's also pretty hilarious seeing the reactions. Like, okay, what's today's food nowadays? I have cauliflower. Really? It's kinda funny. But if something really bad happens at that event, like Lou Williams, like he left the area, the zone, got really in trouble, got 10-day suspension. He went to a party. I'm even surprised there's even like a party, there's like public parties still happening nowadays. And I said people gotta make money, but still, social distancing, what's going on here? So he went to a party, then he came back to the hotel, he got suspended for 10 days, he's being tested, and we don't know what the status of Lou Williams is right now. But if things begin to get worse, especially something really big, like the National Basketball Association, that could bleed into UFC mixed martial arts. Like the WWE right now and and AEW, they're going through like a panic phase right now with their product. And that there's performers there who are getting sick. They're not doing a good job testing their athletes or testing their performers or testing their actors and actresses. Yeah, things are getting kind of complicated right now. Also, here's another thing. School is coming back in some districts in the California area. Some public schools, some high schools, some colleges are reopening up. And there are some classes that are still available where you can physically attend, but the majority of them will be online. Maybe. It's so strange. It's so bizarre what's going on right now. And because of the fact that America is such in a weird position right now, and also Yas Island, we don't know if that's just a one-time thing, or we're gonna relook at Yas Island yet again, Fight Island. I'm unsure. I just really am sure. Because Weili Zhang, she lives in China, right? She lives in China. She's an international fighter. It would make sense for her to compete at Fight Island, but she doesn't want to because she went through this period of time where she was like essentially like locked in Vegas for like 3 weeks. She was pretty much like a prisoner in Vegas in a hotel because she just couldn't leave her area. And it was a part that she was really homesick. She got really stressed. She got a whole lot of anxiety. She was really unhappy of the entire process right now. And I just don't see why Weili Zhang, she doesn't need to. She already made her one fight. She had her one title fight of the year. That's all you really need. She made a whole lot of money from that one title fight. She doesn't need to fight against Rose Namajunas. And Rose Namajunas now she's waiting. Now she's waiting, alright, I want to fight against Weili Zhang. But she's unavailable. Alright, what next? It's a confusing time right now in the women's fight rankings here. But I'll tell you right now, if that fight were to happen, possibly happening sometime early to mid next year, Rose Namajunas versus Weili Zhang, awesome fights. Fight of the year candidates, one of the best fights out there, and I'm personally happy. I'm personally happy that Rose Namajunas is back at it again. She's optimistic, she's positive, she enjoys her job. Because I don't want her to end up in a Tyron Woodley situation where it obviously looks like you'd rather be doing anything else than be an MMA fighter. But I don't mind that actually, because being an MMA fighter, you're not making that much money. But while Tyron Woodley has aspirations of like being an actor / reporter / magician, Rose Namajunas, she's like pretty much narrow-minded, very simple. I want this. I want to be a fighter. I'm really good at it. It's really fun. I'll do that against one of the very best in Weili Zhang. I am excited for that matchup. There's a lot of things happening up this next month in the women's fight rankings here. That the women's fight rankings, I have to say right now, it has to be the most exciting division right now in mixed martial arts. Because although they're 115 pounds, we got some real heavy hitters here. It's a 115 pound division full of knockout artists, really awesome technical strikers, and great grapplers. Like from top to bottom, it's a very dynamic field of fighters. From the grapplers of like Claudia Cadella and Carlos Esparza to the speed fighters of like Rose Namajunas and Ioana Jacek, to the dynamic fighters who have a little bit of everything with insane strength like Jessica Andrade and Weili Zhang. It's a fun division. It's a really fun division, and I can't wait for the top end of the division to like be stable right now. Like the top 5, top 6 right now, things are really unstable. The status of Nina Ansaroff, Rose Namajunas, Tatiana Suarez, Jessica Andrade, Ioana Jacek, Weili Zhang, those are the top 6 best fighters, and they're the obvious top 6 fighters who can pretty much smoke any fighter outside the rankings there. We don't know what their status is. All of them right now are unavailable. So there's a lot of, it's actually a really exciting time right now for also the fight division. Because just like the fight division, the strawweight rankings right now are comprised of a lot of prospect fighters who are working their way up. And the fight division is comprised of a whole lot of prospects who, although may not be fighting against Valentina in the near future or fighting against somebody as good as a Kagan, it's still really deep. It's a super deep division in the fight rankings here. And also, I still remember Namajunas. She was talking about her feud. Okay, so Namajunas already did that thing where you're supposed to call out somebody who you don't like, just in order to prep up the rivalry, the narrative, the story. And then she said that the Weili Zhang fight against the Jacek fight is not the best fight of the year. And her logic was, alright, the reason why that fight wasn't as good as people say it is because a lot of it involves them just beating up each other and not really blocking. And then we end up in the Rose Namajunas. I guess, Rose Namajunas is like one of the best defensive fighters in the game. Because while Weili Zhang is mostly head first, like if you see a Weili Zhang fight, she always presses forward. Or if she's not pressing forward, she's going for the knockout kill move, like Jessica Andrade or Tisa Torres. Where if she's not the one being aggressive, she's gonna knock you out walking backwards. So, in a Rose versus Weili Zhang fight, how will that fight end up? What I can see is Rose Namajunas fighting defensively. She's allowing Weili Zhang to be kind of in her comfort zone here, being overly aggressive because that's the kind of fight that Weili Zhang wants. She wants to be the one who dictates the pace of the fight. So Rose Namajunas, I can see, will be the defensive fighter, and she's gonna move, she's gonna duck out of the way. Like, Jessica Andrade fights very similarly to Weili Zhang. It just so happens that Weili Zhang is just bigger and more stronger. That really is about it. Now, can Rose Namajunas endure the striking of Weili Zhang? Well, she endured Jessica Andrade, who's pound for pound the most strongest woman in the strawweight rankings. Wow, it's a complete toss-up. It's a complete toss-up between Rose. Is the defensive boxing of Rose and her footwork strong enough to compete with the sheer strength and power and the cardio machine that is Weili Zhang? Only time can tell. We don't know when exactly this fight is going to happen. Probably it's going to happen early to mid next year. But when it does happen, fireworks. We are going to see fireworks, and it's going to be an absolute fun fight to watch. So you're listening to the GSMC Women's MMA Podcast. Coming back right after a short break here. See you soon.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play. This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
And we are back. So while the current women's strawweight champion, Weili Zhang, is expected to fight against Rose Namajunas sometime in the future, Valentina Shevchenko, what is she supposed to do next? Well, she was supposed to fight against Joanne Calderwood, but that fight's not going to happen. Joanne Calderwood is going to fight against Jennifer Maia. But Valentina Shevchenko, according to BloodyElbow.com, says, I don't care if Amanda Nunes retires before trilogy bouts. I don't care what she does. For me, my goal is to defend my belt at 125 pounds as much as I can. Valentina Shevchenko and Amanda Nunes almost seem destined to face each other in a trilogy bout. But after Nunes' recent comments about retirement, Valentina Shevchenko isn't sure that they will meet again in the octagon. Shevchenko is 0-2 against Nunes at bantamweight, but since then, the 32-year-old has gone on to capture the UFC Women's Flyweight title and defend her championship 3 times. Nunes, just like Valentina Shevchenko, has been able to defend her belt multiple times, as well as to capture the women's featherweight title to become the first ever female and only female to become a 2-division champion in UFC history. Valentina Shevchenko would ideally like to run back against Nunes, but the reigning women's flyweight champion is okay with the lioness retiring before a trilogy bout. It's totally her personal preference of what she's going to do. What she wants to do, Shevchenko told Nick Baldwin of The Score in a recent interview, I don't care what she does. For me, my goal is to defend my belt at 125 as much as I can. If our paths come across in the future sometime, definitely is going to be a firefight. But she is the last person that I think about in the world. Shevchenko is currently sidelined with a knee injury, but is expected to return to face against Joanne Calderwood, who she was originally going to fight back in June, or by the end of 2020. We are not 100% sure for training camp. I don't want to rush because it was surgery and it's very important for me to heal all the way. Of course, I want to get back. Of course, I want to see fighting happen, and when I see Fight Island and everyone posting their pictures there, I want to be there. I want to feel it. I want to feel the smell of the octagon, but I understand that I can't right now. I'm trying not to think too much about it because, of course, you're going to be upset about what you cannot do. So now we know Joanne Calderwood is fighting against Jennifer Maia. And depending on how that fight goes out there, because Jennifer Maia is a really tough opponent for Joanne Calderwood. It's not like Jennifer Maia is a fighter who's outside the top 10. No. Jennifer Maia, she's like top 5, top 6 in the division right now. And it's a real possibility that Joanne Calderwood could lose her spots. And if that happens, then it's going to be Maia against Valentina. And when I look at that matchup, I'm thinking to myself, Valentina will have a more easier matchup fighting against Jennifer Maia than she would against Joanne Calderwood. That's what I believe. So this coming in from the ATT owner that Joanna Jędrzejczyk will only return for a title fight. I talked about Weili Zhang versus Rose. It looks like Joanna Jędrzejczyk won't step back into the octagon again anytime soon unless there's some gold on the line. Joanna Jędrzejczyk came up short the last time she stepped into the foot of the octagon, but she was part of a classic. Her fight with Weili Zhang was one of the ages and is a front runner for fight of the year in the year 2020. The former women's strawweight champion hasn't mapped out her plan yet, but if you ask American Top Team owner Dan Lambert, she should be fighting for the gold next. As a guest on BJ Penn Radio, Lambert opened up about his best female fighter and made it clear a rematch with Weili is what people are interested in, and Joanna should be fighting for the belt next. It was a great fight and everyone wants to see it again. I think the UFC is leaning towards giving Rose the next shot, so Joanna will sit back and see what happens. I don't think a lot makes sense besides fighting for the title. When asked for a clarification on later on, Lambert doubled down and again slated that fighting for a championship is the only path that Joanna should take. I would be surprised if she fights again other than the title shot. I don't know another fight that makes sense. Joanna Jędrzejczyk has won just 2 of her past 6 fights. All 4 of her losses were in title fights. Oh man. But here's the thing though. You wanna stop awarding Joanna Jędrzejczyk with title fights? I get it. It's kind of bothersome that Joanna Jędrzejczyk is always getting title fights. But she always pulls out a really awesome performance. She always pulls out an amazing performance against whatever fighter she's against. And so it makes sense. Also, she's also guaranteed to give you an exciting fight. Although she might lose the fight, she gives you a guaranteed fight to which the crowd will stand up and be like, oh my gosh, wow, that's amazing. Oh, ain't that amazing? Ain't that awesome? Wow. So Joanna, she's expected to fight, so she's expecting a title fight when she comes back. Alright. Scenario here. Rose versus Weili Zhang. That's gonna happen. I think logically right now, that's the first fight that's gonna happen. Once, Weili Zhang recovers, once Rose Namajunas recovers, that's the best fight in the women's strawweight rankings. And then whoever wins that fight might possibly fight against Joanna Jędrzejczyk. Maybe. Here's a really fun matchup here. Jessica Andrade against Joanna. That's a fight I want to see. And here's the thing. If Joanna Jędrzejczyk is like, you know what? I am the greatest women's strawweight champion of all time. I deserve an immediate title fight. Imagine it. Joanna Jędrzejczyk versus Weili Zhang 2. Or Joanna Jędrzejczyk versus Rose Namajunas 3. Either of those fights would be awesome. But it'd also be unfair for Jessica Andrade. And I'm thinking, if we were to live in a fair world here, I say Joanna Jędrzejczyk versus Jessica Andrade. Whoever wins that fight is next in line for the winner of Rose Namajunas and Weili Zhang. Even if Weili Zhang and Rose Namajunas, even if they had an amazing, spectacular fight that was super close, similarly to Joanna Jędrzejczyk versus Weili Zhang the first time they fought, I would still award the winner of the Joanna versus Jessica Andrade fight, and they'll go fight whoever is the winner for Rose Weili Zhang. I think to me, that's fair. It makes sense. And here's the fun part about the women's strawweight division. it is so competitive among the top 4. You can interchange those 4 women. Weili Zhang, Weili Zhang, Jessica Andrade, Rose Namajunas. You can interchange those 4 in any way possible, and you can create a narrative out of all those 4 women. And all those 4 women, when they're stepping into the octagon, you know, they will pull out an amazing performance. They might pull out the best performance of the entire card. So, those 4 fighters, you can interchange them in any way, but no matter what happens, you're gonna see fireworks, and it's amazing when you get to see any of those 4 women compete against each other. And so for those unaware, Jinh Frey was the atomweight champion for Invicta before she made her way up, fighting against Kay Hansen at 115. Sadly, Jinh Frey lost, and not only did she lose a bout, she also lost her Invicta title because now that title has been vacant because she moved from Invicta to UFC. So Invicta announces atomweight title fight for September 17th. Invicta FC announces Ashley Cummins versus Alicia Zappitella for the vacant atomweight belt, as well as a return of Rachel Kunuto coming back. So, Invicta FC have announced their planned lineup for Invicta FC 42, scheduled to take place at the Police Athletic League in Kansas City on September 17. Headlining the event is an Invicta FC atomweight title bout between Ashley Cummins and Alicia Zappitella. Invicta's 105 belt has been vacated in February because by Jinh Frey failing to make weight at Invicta FC 39 and also her moving to the UFC. After losing to Jinh Frey, Ashley Cummins' record dropped to 7-5 while Zappitella is 7-2 right now. Also coming up for Invicta, the co-main event for Invicta FC 42 sees bantamweights Lisa Battle Angel Verzosa and Raquel Lionheart Canuto duking it out. Verzosa has been last seen competing for the vacant bantamweight title at Invicta FC Phoenix Series 3 in March. There she lost via split decision in a fight of their candidates against Julia Sterlenko. If you people have not seen it, I recommend you look up the fight. It's awesome. Look up Verzosa against Sterlenko. It's hard for me to spell out her name correctly, but just type in Verzosa, Invicta FC, fight of the year candidate. It's the first fight you're gonna see. A bloodbath. It's awesome. I put it in the same league as... Is it better than Weili Zhang versus Weili Zhang? It's up there. I say that 2 best fights of the year is the fight between Joanna, Weili Zhang, and also Sterlenko against Verzosa. Both those fights are awesome. They're amazing. I recommend everybody to go watch those fights. I know a lot of people have seen the UFC title fight, but not many people have seen the Sterlenko fight, because man, that's one of the most bloodiest fights I've ever seen in mixed martial arts history. Absolute insanity. And so, due to the COVID-19 global pandemic, which has killed over 149,000 Americans, sadly, Invicta FC 482 will be held without fans in attendance, like they should. The event will air exclusively on UFC Fight Pass at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. It is being reported that Germaine de Randamie is set to fight against Juliana Pena and is in the works for October 3 event. First reported by MMAfighting.com, an interesting bantamweight matchup is set in the works for October 3 in a bout not yet confirmed by the UFC, well, it's in the works. Former bantamweight title challenger Germaine de Randamie is set to fight against Juliana Pena. GDR last competed at UFC 245, dropping a decision to Amanda Nunes in a bid to dethrone the champ. She is 3-1 in her last 4 bouts, with wins over Holly Holm, Raquel Pennington, and Aspen Ladd. Pena returned to action following a pregnancy hiatus with a unanimous decision win over Nico Montano. Pena's only UFC defeat came at the hands of Valentina Shevchenko back in 2017. This is gonna be another really fun fight here. What I'm surprised about is Germaine de Randamie. She's in the same spot practically as Joanne Calderwood. In the sense, you got these 2 fighters here who obviously, if in a perfect world, in a perfect scenario, should be fighting against their respective champions, but it's not happening. Amanda Nunes, speaking of retirement, we don't know what's going on with her. Germaine de Randamie has to be the closest, not has to be, she is the closest fighter in UFC's history to go possibly defeat Amanda Nunes. Without doubt, there's nobody out there who challenged Amanda Nunes like Germaine de Randamie. There's a lot of people advocating, even me and myself, who are advocating Germaine de Randamie against Amanda Nunes, because that was the one and only one time ever in Nunes' career where you could be like, wow, Germaine de Randamie is better than Nunes at X. Because Nunes is the complete fighter. The only time Nunes was so desperate and was just not confident in her striking was in her bout against Germaine Randomay. And that's when a lot of people really turn on Nunes. A lot of people start turning on Nunes, being like, oh wow, that really hits a chink on your armor. You're not as unstoppable as you think you are. And so, Germaine Randomay versus Amanda Nunes would make sense in a perfect world, like Yvonne Calderwood and Valentina Shevchenko. But because of COVID-19, and also they're MMA fighters, they gotta make money somehow. Germaine Randomay, and so Juliana Pena, she's out there, she's a really good top fighter. She has to go Wade right now. We got other fighters who are pulling out, like Irene Aldana. Things are getting really complicated right now with the divisions, in the sense that there are fighters pulling out. There's some fighters being brought in. We got some fighters that are being called to go fight within just a week's notice. So, Pena versus Germaine Randomay, this fight makes a lot of sense. Whoever wins this fight might possibly fight against Amanda Nunes, depending on what the current status is for Nunes right now. So, Dana White himself has said, you know what, Nunes, she's not retiring. She's not retiring. She can retire because she has a lot of money, but she's not retiring. It's not official that she's retiring. But with all the signs pointing towards Nunes retiring, I'm not saying she is. But if things go the way as they are right now, Germaine Randomay versus Juliana Pena, this could either be in number one contenders fights, or this could possibly be an interim fight. I could see this being a real interim fight. I could imagine Amanda Nunes saying, you know what, I'm going to be unavailable for like 7 months, 4 months, or maybe a year. Let me take some time off. You know, I'm fine with somebody else having an interim title while I'm gone. And it's happened in the past. It's happened in the past where we've had champions like Cain Velasquez who held their title for over a year because they're rehabbing through injury. And according to Dana White, he's like, yeah, Amanda Nunes is the GOAT. She is the greatest women's fighter in the history of the UFC. So I can imagine Amanda Nunes talking to UFC execs and telling them, hey, can I take some time off? And I can see Dana White or someone saying, yeah, you can take some time off. You deserve it. You're the best. So, Germaine Randomay versus Juliana Pena, I don't expect another Amanda Nunes title fight anytime soon. I don't. If Nunes were to fight again, maybe middle next year, maybe. That's a real possibility, but we've seen it in the past where we've had champions take long, extended breaks. And this could be another scenario where Amanda Nunes is going to take a long extended break because she's, you know, going towards motherhood. She's going to be a mom. That's a lot to deal with. So, if Amanda Nunes were to take a break right now, to make a temporary leave of absence, it would make sense. And if she does, I can see GDR against Pena being interim title fights. Coming up right after the short break here, I'll be covering some more women's MMA news here, and I'll be talking about UFC 1, because I rewatched UFC 1, and it's certainly a strange, bizarre show that I believe everybody and anybody should watch because it truly is a spectacle. Till this day, I haven't seen any show that's as similar as UFC 1. And weird trivia here, one of the first ever commentators for UFC events was a woman. You're listening to the GSMC Women's MMA Podcast. Coming back right after a short break here.
Are you looking for help for your fantasy football team? Check out the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. Get today's best advice on who to start, who to sit, even who you should draft. From sleeper picks to red hot lineups, they got it all covered for you. That's GSMCpodcast.com/fantasy-football-podcast. We'll cover traditional leagues, dynasty, PPR, even IDP leagues. When you need fantasy help, there's just one show to hit up. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
And we are back. So I decided to watch UFC 1 this past weekend. I decided to watch UFC 1 because I was thinking, you know what? The sport has evolved so much in the past couple of years. I want to see where it started. How did the UFC look like back then? So I went back to 1993, went on ESPN Plus, watched UFC 1, and wow, it definitely was a ride. It definitely was a spectacle. Even until now, I haven't seen any show as similar or as close as a spectacle as it was UFC 1. Because first off, that show really was the embodiment of mixed martial arts. I know a lot of people just do not enjoy the modern iteration of mixed martial arts. And it's because, well, is it really mixed martial arts if all the fighters, or if most of the fighters, fight very similarly? Because currently nowadays, we have fighters who have a good mixture of Muay Thai, Jiu-Jitsu, amateur wrestling, boxing, kickboxing. There's a good blend of a little bit of all that. Now we have some wrestlers that do karate. We have some wrestlers that do traditional Chinese martial arts. We have some fighters doing Wing Chun, some fighters doing capoeira. But for the most part, many of these fighters fight the same. And as I'm going backwards in time here, back in 1993 here, it astounded me that there was a female commentator. Note, the very first UFC event had a female commentator. And now let's go to the year of 2020 here. There are no female commentators. There are none. Now we have female athletes, female fighters who talk about it, who talk about the event in like pre and post-fight interviews and shows. We have fighters like Michelle Waterson, fighters like Miesha Tate. They go up there and they talk about the sport of mixed martial arts. They do it. They do some like pre-fight, interviews. They do some post-fight, like analysis of events and of what's going on. They provide commentary to an extent. But it astounded me in the first ever UFC event, we had a female commentator. Cut like 15 years later, we have Dana White saying, you know what? There's not going to be any female women's mixed martial arts happening. Then consider Ronda Rousey. Now Ronda Rousey's gone. Now we have a great plethora of amazing fighters in the women's divisions. I remember around 2015, 2016, looking at the old forums, and you can go trace back to this. You can trace back to the old, to forums that happened in 2015, 2016. And a lot of people will say the worst parts about watching mixed martial arts is the woman. It's tough to watch women's mixed martial arts. And I have a tendency of kind of agreeing. And the reason why I agree was because it was so forced, the women's mixed martial arts thing. You had a plethora of, you have divisions, you have an entire plethora of fighters who no one has ever heard of. They're all of a sudden placed on the spotlights. There's no narratives, there's no characters, there's no storylines. Nowadays, there definitely are. We got very interesting fighters like Rose Namajunas, Weili Zhang, Valentina Shevchenko, Amanda Nunes. Even up-and-coming fighters like Cynthia Cavallo, Amanda Ribas, Moreno Rodriguez, Maria Agapova, Jun Frey, Kay Hansen. We have a lot of different personalities all slowly coming in, filling certain roles in the UFC. You may not like Paige Van Zandt, but she's different. She stands out from the other fighters in that she's like the Instagram model, who's also a fighter. And then we have Michelle Waterson, who is like this fighter / model / mom / like UFC commentator person. It's so strange. Like UFC like post-fight analysis kind of person. We have the rivalry between the one-sided rivalry of Miesha Tate, Ronda Rousey, the rise of Amanda Nunes, the underrated queen of the strawweight division in Joanna Jędrzejczyk. A lot of characters, a lot of narratives, a lot of storylines that were built up organically. But back around 2015, 2016, it was like, hey, boom, look at all these women's fighters. Yeah, now cheer for them. And it was tough for a lot of people to grasp onto that. I find it strange, since, first ever UFC event, there was a female commentator, and I'm gonna continue watching the rest of the UFC events. It's like, is there more, like, female commentators or female interviewers that happened? I don't really think so, because I think in the entire UFC 1 show, there was a grand total of, like, one female who actually, like, said a word, which really astounded me. But going back to UFC 1 here, UFC 1 was such a bizarre take, because it really was, in its purest sense, mixed martial arts. You had people from different backgrounds fighting each other, and unlike how it is all homogenized right now, where you have fighters having a good basis of wrestling, jiu-jitsu, Muay Thai, kickboxing, instead of that, we have, I'll go through these fights now. Gerard Gordeau, who is a Savate fighter, fighting against Atilia Tooley, who fought sumo. And when this matchup happened, I just kept thinking about the intro. the intro of the UFC 1, which is like early 90s, really bizarre, where you hear a commentator, "Welcome to the Ultimate Fighting Championships. Here's how it goes. First off, there are no time limits, no rounds, no judges, and no rules." And then my dad, who was watching the show, cause like me and him are cooking together, so he tilts over his head, he sees no rules, and immediately me and him look at each other, and we start giggling our butt off. It was funny because we're like, okay, if there are no rules, how do you win? Because, yeah, that's what rules are, right? Rules is to show, the rules isn't just limitations, it's also to provide like a brief summary. It's helping you out understand what is the win condition. Win conditions are rules. You know that, right? But then it's like, the only way to defeat your opponent is to incapacitate them. No tap outs, but you can win via tap out. Oh, by the way, there are no rules. It's the most insane thing ever. Not only are there no rules, and there's no time limits, and there's no judges, and there's no rounds, one of the fights had a time limit. It had a timer. And I'm looking at this right now. Here are the round time notes. They're round time notes. The first fight, Gerard Gordeau against Tully Tuli, TKO head kick via Gordeau, in which he kicked Tully's head while he was on the ground. 26 seconds. Kevin Rosier versus Zane Frazier. This probably was like the most fun fight of the entire night. That ended at 4:20 via TKO corner stoppage. Really insane. Absolute fun fight. Royce Gracie against Art Jimerson ended at 2:18 when Art Jimerson tapped out to Royce Gracie mounting him. Not only that, Art Jimerson fought with one punching glove. And my dad was watching this. He was so confused. He told me, "Hey, why does he wearing a punching glove? Why doesn't he use bare knuckle? Because with the punching glove, there's padding. And also, why is he just using one punching glove? Because that turned out really bad for him when Royce Gracie was grappling with Art Jimerson, and Art Jimerson, the only thing he could do was grab on with only one arm because he's a weird boxing glove here." So I thought to myself, alright, why would Art Jimerson use one boxing glove? Not only that, consider the fact that there are no rules. What stops a fighter from putting like an iron plate on their glove, putting iron padding, so they can go and just knock out the other person with one punch? What stops them from doing that? Because the no rules thing, the reason why it's so bizarre, because what's stopping Ken Shamrock bringing his entire Lions Den crew to jump inside the cage and start curb stomping Royce Gracie? And you'll hear the commentary team being like, "Oh man, now how could you do that? How could there be like a 10-on-1 fight happening in the cage?" And then Ken Shamrock can be like, "Well, guess what? You heard the intro. There's no rules." What stops a dude bringing a katana, bringing a chainsaw, loading up his boxing glove with iron, steel, or diamonds? Like, what stops kneeing a person in the balls or eye gouging? Absolute insanity. Ken Shamrock defeated Patrick Smith via heel hook. By the way, the fact that Royce Gracie and Ken Shamrock were so far ahead of the game here, they're the only two people to attempt submission moves and win via submission moves. Even though Royce Gracie defeating Art Jimerson with a mount, I wouldn't get a submission, just kinda weird. And so, we're going here to the second round, semifinals. Royce Gracie versus Ken Shamrock. Royce Gracie versus Ken Shamrock here is the most closest thing to the modern mixed martial arts game. We got a wrestler versus a jiu-jitsu practitioner, and Royce Gracie was able to win with a sleeve choke, and Ken Shamrock in his post-fight interview said, "I never experienced anyone who fought like this, ever." And then we have Gerard Gordeau defeating Kevin Rosier via TKO corner stoppage. He curve stomped his side hip really badly. Yikes. Painful. Gerard Gordeau, man, scary looking guy. Scary, scary looking man. And in the finals, we had Royce Gracie against Gerard Gordeau, a fight that lasted 1 minute and 44 seconds. And you know what's so funny here? The commentary team, they had like an NFL football Hall of Famer. Like he was like every round he's going at it where he's like, I don't want any fight to go long. And he thought Royce Gracie versus Art Jimmerson, he thought that fight went long. That fight went 2 minutes. It was a 2 minute and 18 second fight. And to Art Jimmerson, it was like, oh man, that was a long, boring fight. What? And he called Ken Shamrock versus Patrick Smith a fight that went on for barely 2 minutes, a boring fight. Can you imagine if these people were to get a time machine, go to modern day 2020, they saw Fight Island, how would they react to fights? I don't know. I really don't. If none of you have watched UFC 1, try watching it via YouTube. I think the entire episode of UFC 1 is on YouTube. Watch UFC 1, watch it on Dailymotion, YouTube, on ESPN+. I can guarantee you right now, it is an absolute spectacle. And there's no way any of you could go to this and be like, wow, oh my gosh, this is the most bizarre show I've ever seen. Because it truly is bizarre, it's strange, it's weird, and to be honest with you, I recommend anybody to watch it just so you can see how much UFC has changed. Alright, well that brings to a close for today's podcast, but before I officially end the podcast here, let me just do a quick review here of what to expect coming up this Saturday. We have UFC Fight Night, Derek Brunson against Edmen Shahbazyan. Edmen Shahbazyan coming under the tutelage of Ronda Rousey. Haven't heard her name in a while in the UFC. But we have Derek Brunson against Edmen Shahbazyan, Johan Calderwood versus Jennifer Maia, Vicente Luque versus Randy Brown, Lando Venata versus Bobby Green, and Kevin Holland versus Trevin Giles. This is a huge risk for Johan Calderwood, as she's matched up against Jennifer Maia. Huge risk for her, but you know what? She's gotta make money somehow. Alright then, she's gotta make some money. She can't keep holding off on that number one contendership for Valentina. And in the prelim cards here, we got Frankie Saenz against Jonathan Martinez, Ed Harmon against Gerald Mistrat, Ray Borg against Nate Matisse, Eric Spicey against Marcus Perez, Jamal Emmers versus Timur Valev, and Chris Gutierrez against Cody Durbin. That fight will be coming up this Saturday, August 1st, starting at 3 p.m. at the UFC Apex Facility Building at ESPN+. You've been a great audience. All I gotta say is thank you. Thank you for tuning into the GSMC Women's MMA Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'd like to ask you, please remember to subscribe to the show and write a nice review. That really helps us. Also, if you can please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Thank you, and have a good night.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Women's Mixed Martial Arts Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.